1. This is update for September 28, 2022, day 217 of the war, end of the date update. So first of all, I'm feeling almost pretty much perfect, and it feels great. But now let's actually switch to situation in the world. So there is definitely something going on, as I said, with this explosion on Nord Stream 1 and 2, and you definitely can say that there is that it's being done by West. There's very little defense you can put against that, and it's totally possible. One thing, there was one Twitter by former Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs who said, "Thank you, USA," after that explosion. So I'm not saying that there is evidence or anything, but interesting tweet, let's put this way. Then related to all of this, there was alert sent to US citizens abroad, and specifically in Russia, asking them to immediately leave Russia. So something similar has been done to US citizens in Ukraine before the start of the war. And then actually not just US did that, but I think a couple days before, a number of countries did the same thing to their citizens. So there was Poland, Denmark, Bulgaria, Romania, I believe Estonia. Might be missing one or two, but that's just roughly all countries. Then to add to this, Turkish President Erdogan is calling Putin to basically broker last-minute peace negotiation between Ukraine and Russia. So as I said, there is something going on behind the scenes that may or may not erupt in the next, let's say, 5 days, basically early October. We'll see how it all plays out. We don't know what's going on, but there's something definitely going on behind the scenes, and something, let's say, serious. The chances of the successful negotiations are pretty slim. So I think for that reason, Russian leadership decided not to go ahead with approval of these referendums and basically annexation of these territories, because they still want to have a conversation with Ukrainian president. But as I said, the chances of any kind of success are close to zero, as Ukraine wants all of its territories back, including Crimea. For Russia to concede that, it's essentially start of but who knows, maybe it's not, but it definitely can lead to 1917 in Russia, essentially. So Russian leadership is probably fully aware of that, and they will do everything to avoid that, because they can face destiny of Gaddafi and so on, and so they definitely would fight against that. Then there was also news that there is negotiation between Ukrainian and Russian side of exchanging all of the prisoners of war, like all for all. So basically, whatever Russia has, and then Ukraine has fewer, right? And then Ukraine returns all of the Russians. So again, this is whole pointing that something is happening behind the scenes, something serious. We'll find out soon, or maybe that's just going to be, it will dissipate on its own and nothing is going to happen in the end. In terms of tactical nuclear weapons that, say, Russia and former Soviet Union, because it's all from Soviet Union, had, they have two artillery shells. One is RD-4, and it's for 152 millimeter howitzers or cannons, let's put it this way. And the furthest it can be shot is 70 kilometers, and the other, and it's I believe it was like 2 or 2.5 kilotons of equivalent, high explosive equivalent. So just for the reference, I think smaller bomb in Japan in 1945 was about 15 or 16 kiloton. So as you can see, this is, well, if it's 2, then it's probably essentially one shell is 1/8 of that nuclear bomb, smaller one. Then there is also RDF-5, and that is for 203 millimeter howitzer. That one is actually only for sure 2 kilotons. I'm not sure why the smaller caliber would be 2.5 potentially. Not an expert in this, but that's just the information I got. And that one the 203 millimeter howitzer can shoot it for 50 kilometers. So that's just kind of information. And as I said, it's 1/8 for sure of that smaller nuclear bomb that was thrown on, I don't remember, Hiroshima or Nagasaki, whichever one had the smaller one, because they actually were not the same in their capabilities. Now let's actually move to the front line. Things are pretty much kind of static, not many news today. Nevertheless, we'll walk through everything to kind of give you update. So along the state border situation, more or less stable. Some, as I said, for several days now, it's somewhat subdued. Not much is, there's no intense exchange of fire. Now let's actually jump to this North Luhansk front line, which is where the main action is, and where it's easiest for Ukrainian side at this point to achieve sort of success before arrival of the mobilized troops in large numbers to the front line. So the only known advance, let's put it this way, because there's a lot very hard to get information. The only known advance by Ukrainian forces was expansion of this bridgehead on the eastern side of Oskil towards south by liberating village Kovshivka. So essentially, and it's being very clear that the Russian front along this Oskil river is definitely destroyed and crumbling and falling apart. Really, at this point, the question is this Svatova. Will Ukrainian troops will be able to reach Svatova before arrival of the mobilized troops or not? That's a real question at this point. So, based on our information, there were no new advances here towards north. Basically, if you remember, we mentioned that there was quite a bit of advance towards north yesterday. Was more or less stable, sort of this eastern sort of section of this whole bridgehead. And now let's actually look at the sort of southern section of this whole thing. By the way, one correction: I'd say remnants of 752nd Regiment of 3rd Mechanized Division are actually in Drobysheva, because before there was some information it's here on the northern sort of side of this bridgehead, and it's actually in Drobysheva. So there's actually some troops, let's put it this way, in this potential pocket. So Ukrainian troops are actively attacking Tversky, but so far there is no success. So, and obviously, it's Russian troops are holding on as much as they can, because they totally realized if Ukrainian troops liberate or this Tversky, then they are in a pocket, and even unmotivated soldiers probably will fight, because they understand that otherwise they're going to be in a pocket. So otherwise, there is no other essential advances or movements. Russian troops still holding on in Drobysheva, holding on in Liman, holding on in Yampil. So those are three main strongholds, and obviously Torsk and Zarechny is another fourth one. This whole potential pocket is based on. So otherwise, there's no major advances here today. Now, this is just a kind of quickly review how things were sort of transpiring. So as you can see, this is initial bridgehead here, also near Kupyansk. Then next day we also have in Dvorizhna. Then this pretty big advance next day. There was essentially no advances on 25th. Then on 26th there is major advances. Again, even more so on that's where the Russian defenses are totally crumbling on the 27th. However, today there were no major advances. At least we're not aware of those. That's potentially not a positive sign that Ukrainian troops might be exhausted, overextended, and even the Russian troops are definitely small in size, also super exhausted. But it just at this point they need sort of break and being refitted, and so this is just a hypothesis. I'm not saying that this is true because Russian sources saying there's significant number of reinforcements, reserves, and so on, and that much even larger scale attack is imminent. Totally possible. We don't have reports from Ukrainian general staff, and we don't have reports from the Russian general staff. So this is based on information we have. So we'll see what happens in the next couple days. But as I said before, the immediate objective is really Svatove, and then the next one is Starobinsk, essentially liberation of all of this North Luhansk region. In terms of economic value, it's pretty low. I would say there's nothing there in this except for agriculture. Essentially, it's purely essentially agricultural area. This whole thing, and this one that was liberated here, this is essentially all just agriculture, food processing, nothing sort of high value add, with exception in Izium, but all of that was basically destroyed in the process in the fighting. So there's nothing, and obviously Donetsk, Lysychansk, Rubizhne, but all of that was destroyed at this point. So now let's move to North Donbass front line. Things here are also pretty much the same. Actually, it was quiet all the way from north of Bakhmut. Was a quiet day in terms of attacks, not the exchange of artillery fire. But there was nothing major going on both sides. At the same time, it was extremely active, so it looks like Russian command decided to a little bit switch tactic or strategy, whatever you call it. They decided to be sort of more concentrated, more focused, and probably create significant advantage on very narrow section of the front line. So as you can see, all attacks were essentially here on this in this salient area, and then there's support attack here in the northwestern direction as well, just to prevent Ukrainian troops, Ukrainian command from taking reserves from here to sort of help troops over there. At the same time, Russian troops didn't achieve anything. This was Wagner mercenaries, as we discussed, as can be seen here. Then let's look what's going on the central Donbass front line. Things here are more or less the same. Again, no news, no changes. Some attacks out of this Pisky salient, attacks north of Novomikhailivka, attacks towards Pavlivka, where the Russian command is fearing the next major offensive is going to happen. We'll see if that's true. But they sort of preemptively trying to attack there. Now let's check what's going on Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet as pretty much always it is here. Now let's finally check what's going on at Kherson bridgehead. What we do know, there were new attacks at Antonievsky Bridge. Pretty sure there were some hits. So there is this war against the Russians. Resupply and logistic continues. It's successful. It's not widely successful, but it's successful enough to basically drain Russian forces on this bridgehead eventually from artillery shells, so that they cannot put up effective resistance. So at the same time, they were small scale attack here on this bridgehead today without much success. Otherwise, Ukrainian troops did not attack anywhere. So essentially, it's a stalemate right now. And for the most point, Ukrainian troops are waiting out for the Russian troops to be drained out of their resources before launching attack there. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.